Hello and welcome into another episode of Friar Territory here on the Foul Territory Network. I'm Kyle Glazer. We are joined by a very, very special guest today, Susan Slusser, the senior baseball reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle, really an icon in the sports writing world and the baseball beat writing world, here to break down the San Francisco Giants coming into the 2025 season. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Kyle, you are way too nice to me. I'm just very happy to be here because this is going to be a really interesting season for the Giants. So I'm eager to talk.
Absolutely. You mentioned an interesting season, and the biggest change we saw in the offseason, Farhan Zaidi, president of baseball operations, was dismissed after the Giants recorded only one winning season in 6 years under his watch. He was replaced by Buster Posey, franchise icon, and really one of the most respected people in the game, everything he did for the Giants as a player, but also just kind of his standing and his presence throughout baseball. Additionally, Pete Putila, who was the general manager under Farhan Zaidi, left to become the assistant GM of the Braves. Zach Manassian, who was previously the Giants VP of Pro Scouting, was elevated to GM. So Buster Posey, president of baseball operations, Zach Manassian, GM. Big changes in the Giants front office. What have been the most noticeable differences already here in the first few months, just culturally and organizationally?
Well, I think Buster Posey wants a team that's sort of a little bit in his image, which you might think means, I'm going to go out and get a bunch of, all-star caliber players. But I don't think that that's what he's looking for. That sometimes really star players who wind up as either managers or in the front office don't have a lot of patience because they don't necessarily understand why everyone just isn't good the way they were. But I think what Buster Posey really values is he's talked a lot about grit. I think we can boil that down to playing the game hard and not making a lot of mistakes. He wants, this is really smart in this division, as you know, I would say this is the toughest division in baseball, the NL West.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, they're not going to outslug teams like the Dodgers or the Padres. They're not going to outrun a team like Arizona. They've got a decent rotation, and I'm sure we'll get to it later. Justin Verlander has looked pretty good so far this spring. It's only spring, so we'll put a little pause on that. But they're going pitching, they're going defense, and this for the first time in many years, I've heard the word small ball. We don't hear that much in the Bay Area in general, but they want to scratch out runs however they can. The offense was really their downfall last year, particularly in the second half. They just stopped hitting. And they've addressed that in numerous different ways, including bringing in Willie Adames, who, of course, drove in 112 runs last year. Right there, that helps. But I think that he wants a team, of winners. This isn't the things that he has talked about are things that the previous front office, and no slam on them. It's just completely different approach. These are not necessarily quantifiable. He wants winners. He wants gritty guys. He wants the team to play really cohesively. He wants team chemistry, which has always been kind of something front offices that are analytical have even pushed back against the notion that exists. I think more traditional baseball people would argue that it does. Buster Posey was part of three championship teams that probably were not the best team in any of those years, but they found a way to get things done. That's what he's looking for. It doesn't hurt that he's got some really pretty good players. I don't think they have the star power that the Dodgers or the Padres have, but they've got a lot of really professional guys. That's the Buster Posey way.
Absolutely. You mentioned the quantifiable versus, the more qualitative characteristics, and those are so key. I think anyone who says chemistry doesn't exist needs to spend a lot more time in a clubhouse or really any athletic endeavor because saying it doesn't exist is kind of laughable. one of the things we saw with Farhan Zaidi and his group is because he came from a quantitative, more academic background, that was where most of his strategy was based. That's where a lot of his analysis was based. And there were times where you saw the Giants kind of embody what happens when a team goes a little bit too far into the quantitative direction and doesn't fully appreciate the qualitative. The example that comes to mind is we saw them pinch hitting for guys in the fifth inning and platooning to an extreme amount. And they were so obsessed with optimizing every single matchup based on what the paper printout said, they forgot the key part that players can't find an offensive rhythm if they're not in the lineup every day. So I think it's something where there needed to be a better balance. And that was what struck me with the dismissal of Zaidi and replacing him with someone like Posey. It felt like a very, very far swing the opposite direction, which I think, especially given how stagnant some of the Giants teams have become, you talk about wanting to be a little more, sharp and run and gritty. The 2023 team in particular was painful to watch. They were just so stagnant. It did feel like this was a response to being maybe overly quantitative, swinging hard the other direction in more of the qualitative characteristics with Posey.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really do. And some of the other things that he's done is he's brought back, former Giants. Like Bob Melvin he didn't bring back, but he's one. There's some former Giants on his staff. He's either elevated or brought back guys. Randy Wynn's taking over player development, all that kind of thing. That goes a long way. But there's the analytic approach is not going away. I do think that Bob Melvin now will have more leeway to use, his at times pushback on, maybe platooning or pinch hitting in certain situations based on his wealth of knowledge. You're talking about somebody with, you know, 3+ decades in the game.
Yeah.
Let him loose. And I think that is probably, we will see that more. Not entirely. The analytics will still come into play. They will still platoon. I think part of that is personnel. But you might not necessarily see Mike Yastrzemski getting pinch hit if he's swinging the bat well, or if he's had some really good at bats that game. They will counter kind of what the analytics sometimes are better, not necessarily projecting day to day. They're better for projecting maybe future, for acquiring talent. Here are the trends. But on a day to day basis, it's not necessarily, sometimes it's the eyes. I think they will go with eyes and knowledge. And I like that. You use it all, right? But have some common sense about it sometimes.
Data is one piece of the equation. It is not the entire equation. There's no question you need to be able to see, hey, is the guy swing the bat well? Is the guy, or do his legs look tired? All these things make a big, big difference in performance, and sometimes it gets overlooked. You mentioned Bob Melvin, and obviously Bob was the Padres manager for the 2022 and 2023 seasons, and covering him a lot during those years, I think the best way to say it is by the end, you could tell he was pretty exasperated. Those Padres teams in 2022 and 2023 were star laden, and they tended to play down to the level of their competition. Did not always put forth the best effort. You'll remember in 2022, it wasn't until early September when Melvin ripped into them in Arizona that they finally woke up, got hot at the end, and went on to beat the Dodgers in the NLDS. In the 2023 season, that team was just sleepwalking through the first part of the year. I remember seeing them get booed off the field against teams like the Royals and Nationals, losing series at home. And Melvin was always very professional. He's a class act, one of the best in the game. Was never going to publicly drag players, but you could see it, you could hear it. There was just a lot of exasperation on his part, just because the team, again, they played down to the level of their competition. How was his first year in San Francisco last year, coming back to a franchise he knows and loves? Obviously, you know him very well from his days in Oakland. Just how did he seem? Did he seem refreshed? What was kind of the reaction of Bob Melvin's first year in San Francisco?
It's kind of a dream scenario both for the Giants and for Melvin in a way. I think that if you had, when he was first starting out as a coach and you had asked him, which team he wanted to manage, he probably would have said the Giants. I suspect, he's from, the Palo Alto Menlo Park area. He went to Cal. He played for the Giants. This is, he managed the A's for 12 years, 12+ years. This is absolutely perfect for him. The familiarity with not just the area, but with so many people in the organizations, the fans. It's a great situation for any manager, but especially for somebody from the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Uh, and he knew Farhan Zaidi. I think a lot was made of some remarks Will Clark made in the offseason, essentially suggesting that Farhan was making out the lineup every day. It was not that far. It was fairly standard, I think, for most teams most of the time, which is, here are the analytics. These are these are the things we're kind of thinking. But I never got the sense that it was hard and fast. I think they butted heads probably sometimes over some decision making, also very standard in today's game. But he did know Farhan, so I think that even that made that relationship. And obviously, Farhan hired him in the first place.
Right.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Buster's the one that really does not know Bob. He didn't play for him. He obviously played against him some, but they are spending this year sort of getting to know each other. But they're both former Giants catchers. And every time ask something about, like, how are you and Buster sort of seeing, this position, that position, Bob usually says Buster and I are on the same page about whatever that happens to be. So so far so good. They'll butt heads at some point. That's just sort of the nature of these jobs. Who doesn't butt heads with their boss once in a while?
It's inevitable. I think the main thing is he seems re-energized, just given again all the factors you stated. Because again, it was clear by the time the 2023 season ended in San Diego that there was again exasperation is the best word I would use. Susan, turning to on the field, we saw for a number of years the Giants really struggled to attract top tier free agent position players. Aaron Judge obviously was most famous. Carlos Correa, they struck a deal for. The deal fell through after he failed his physical. They were able to bring Matt Chapman in last year on a 3 or $54 million deal. He performed so well, they tore that up and negotiated an extension with him in September for 6 years. They were able to sign Jung Hoo Lee to the largest contract ever given to an Asian-born player last year. This offseason, they went out, signed Willie Adames, 7 years, $182 million, the largest contract in Giants franchise history. It feels like they've turned a corner a little bit and that they have been able to attract some position players and keep some position players with larger six-figure deals. Nine-figure deals, excuse me, not six figures, nine-figure deals. Just overall, does it feel like there's been a shift in the organization that they can keep and attract star players really for it feels like the first time since the first part of last decade when they were winning World Series?
Yeah, it's interesting because, some of the more high profile examples of that were players they probably weren't going to get, but they made a really strong run at. I think, again, this is one of those areas where I think Farhan Zaidi maybe got a little bit of a bad rap. They probably weren't going to get Aaron Judge, but their offer to Judge, which came before the Yankees came to terms with him, was the same offer he signed with the Yankees for. Like, this wasn't a money thing. They really made legitimate efforts to get guys. Obviously, Ohtani, they said, yeah, we're willing to do that. What do you want? We're willing to do it. We'll do anything. He was going to go to LA. So some of this, I think Bryce Harper's the one that everybody looks at and says, that is probably the guy that they might have gotten that they kind of fell short on. That's going back ways, obviously. I think they're just, they went after Corbin Burns this offseason. They needed to replace Blake Snell.
Yeah.
I think at a certain point they did decide that maybe they weren't going to be able to land him for what they thought they were, maybe a shorter term deal, fewer early opt-outs. Buster Posey does not like the early opt-out, which has been a little bit more common with Scott Boras clients the last few years. And I think they backed away. Obviously, they pivot to Justin Verlander on a 1-year deal. But this one where you go, okay, that's understandable too. Last year, they brought in 4 prominent free agents, obviously Snell, Chapman, they bring in Soler. Like this was a team that really was trying to improve last year. And at the time, we said they are spending a ton of money. Their payroll went well over 200 million, and they could finish in 4th place in this division. That's exactly what happened. So at some point, you have to go like, what realistically are we looking at, and what are we spending to, maybe miss out on the playoffs again. I think they're trying to be a little bit more calculated in not, and honestly, I'm not trying to suggest that the previous front office was not calculated. They very much had their reasons for all the things that they did. But I think that they are, there was no mandate to cut the payroll. I think that they were very much targeting guys up to a certain number, and then thought, maybe not this year. I think in, the next year or two, I think there will be some guys that they throw a lot of money at, and it might be some of their own guys.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Justin Verlander, again, losing Blake Snell to the division rival Dodgers hurts. Michael Conforto also signed with the Dodgers. Justin Verlander obviously is one of the best pitchers of this generation. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is 42 years old. He did struggle to stay healthy last year. And when he was on the mound, he wasn't particularly effective, an ERA up around 5.5. What are the Giants expecting from him this year, both in terms of workload as well as quality?
Well, so far this spring, and again, this is spring, he looks like Justin Verlander of a few years ago. And I mean, this is a guy who, at the age of 39, came back from Tommy John surgery and won a Cy Young the next year, which that just doesn't happen at any age. You don't come back your first year after Tommy John and win a Cy Young. He looks like that guy. Last year, he had these neck problems, and he said that the reason probably for the neck problems and then for the poor performance was his mechanics were off. He's figured that out. He looks like, he's always had such smooth, perfect. Like you're going to do a training video. You go like, look at these mechanics. They're
Oh, yeah.
just absolutely perfect. That's what it looks like. And look, it's just like a little bit off here or there. I couldn't look at what he was doing last year and say, this is the thing that was throwing him off because it was so small, but he's
Yeah.
figured it out. He really has looked good. I ask the scouts who are at his starts all the time, what do you think? And they've all been like, yeah, this looks like the guy. Like, this is the guy we remember. So, is he going to win a Cy Young? Probably not. But if he is for the Giants, a decent sort of what you would say 3 or 4, great. He's pitching in the number 2 slot in terms of their expectations for him. I think what you would want out of a third or fourth starter. I think they would be very happy with that.
Another Cy Young Award winner they have that's coming off of some injury shortened seasons is Robbie Ray. I think a lot of people forget about Robbie Ray. When he's healthy, he is one of the best, most dominant left handed pitchers in baseball, but it's a big if he's healthy. What are the Giants looking for out of him this year? What are they reasonably expecting? Just again, given his struggles to stay healthy in recent years.
Oh my gosh, Robbie Ray is so much fun, and I'm telling you, like, I think he low key could be one of the best pitchers in the league this year. I mean, he's just uh he's such a pleasant, like, easygoing guy. And he's so good. You almost kind of wouldn't even think it, but every time he's out there, and he's got a vast array of pitches, and he's so smart. He looks like he's in that second year removed from Tommy John, and I
Yeah.
think he is. He's just, this is his year to shine. I wouldn't be surprised if Logan Webb's obviously an extremely good pitcher and a Cy Young runner-up. I'm not sure if I could pick him between which one I think will be the Giants' top starter this year. But it might be Robbie Ray. I think low key, if you're in a fantasy league, anyone, I would pay a lot for Robbie Ray. So don't hold me to that financially in any sort of litigation.
No, absolutely. But no, it's good to hear because again, very, very talented. And when he's right, he can do some special things. And you look at this rotation and say, hey, Logan Webb, obviously, as you mentioned, one of the best pitchers in baseball, well established. Justin Verlander and Robbie Ray, when they are right, two of the best pitchers in baseball. You add Jordan Hicks, you have Kyle Harrison, a young lefty. There's certainly a lot of talent in this rotation. As you mentioned, what has hamstrung the Giants in recent years has been the offense. Matt Chapman came back last year and had really his best offensive season in a few years. Willie Adames signed the big deals we talked about. Both of them are off to really good starts in spring training. I think it's fair to say that these two will be the leaders of the offense potentially. What can or should the Giants expect from them? Again, Adames going from a hitter-friendly park in Milwaukee to a pitcher-friendly park in San Francisco is going to be something to watch.
Yeah, Chapman being having a full spring last year, he didn't. He signed late. I think that's big for him, and he's looked tremendous.
Yeah.
And he had some injury issues when he was at Toronto. Some of that hampered some of his previous spring trainings. He looks, having covered him, the early part of his career in Oakland.
Yeah.
Um, that's that's what he reminded. Like, this is not a surprise to me. I keep, like, last year was the surprise. I was like, it doesn't look quite right. Solid season, but
Yeah.
particularly defensively, which you always get. But offensively, he looks like kind of a force to be reckoned with. Um, and Willie Adamas is, I've always admired him from afar, of
Oh,
course. But when you're talking a great two-way shortstop who's also a team leader and brings a ton of energy, that's kind of going back to what I was talking about with Buster Posey. This is a guy who really exemplifies the things he's looking for. He's got enthusiasm. He's got energy. He does not quit. He played in 161 last year, and he told
yes.
Bob Melvin, like, "You're not taking me out of the lineup. I'm going to play in 162." So uh, that's what the Giants want to see. And Pat Burrell the other day told me the RBI has maybe fallen out of favor, but the Giants didn't have enough guys producing last year. There just weren't a lot of run producers. He said, got to have a nose for the RBI. This is a guy who has a nose for driving in runs. And he's so far so good. I mean, yeah, it's spring, but his track record sort of speaks for itself. And, his influence, is team wide, but particularly we see it with, the Spanish speaking players. He really has, he's like a friend and a mentor and also a coach a little bit in some ways with the Spanish speakers. So, and
Great.
everybody, but they really just look up to him to such an extent. I think that can be a little bit of a difference maker too.
Absolutely. It seems like from the outside, Jung Hoo Lee could be an X factor for this club. As we mentioned, coming over from Korea, one of the best pure hitters. I had gotten his name from a scout back in 2020 when the world was shut down. Hey, this is someone to really watch. I wrote him up then, and everything turned out really well. It's always nice when the scouting report goes the way I hope it will, as opposed to,
Excellent, Kyle.
makes me look dumb. But we saw last year, typically when Korean players come over, it's a big jump from KBO level pitching to MLB pitching. Sometimes it takes them half a season or a full season. Padres saw it with Ha-Sung Kim. There's plenty of other examples previously. Lee got off to a little bit of a slow start, but he was starting to find his groove a little bit. Hit about 280, good on base percentage over the last 30 some odd games. Then his season came to a premature end, slammed into the wall in center field, had season-ending shoulder surgery. If he's healthy and right, he seems like he could be a really, really good table setter. How has he looked in camp? I know he just had to go get an MRI on his back. It came back clean, but what are the Giants expecting from him here in year two? Because year two is when we see a lot of Korean players really start to pop.
Yeah, well, when we talk about the Giants' offense kind of being the one of the main reasons that they underperformed last year, I think everybody forgets that Jung Hoo Lee played in, barely a month and a half of the season, and he was their leadoff man.
Yeah.
Huge difference. What we saw last year was the bat to ball skills are kind of as advertised. Special player, a little I hate to put this on him, especially since he's his all-time favorite player, but a little reminiscent sometimes of Ichiro
Yeah.
Suzuki. I'm not saying watch out, he's a Hall of Famer, but that kind of player.
Physically, the swing, yeah,
Yeah.
it looks a lot
And
like it.
the thing that I think everybody that saw him day to day watched was that it wasn't just necessarily that he was kind of getting better. It was the quality of the at bats were getting better. Like, you could tell he was really sort of absorbing the differences between Korea and the major leagues. He was getting a real feel. Now he's still going to have to basically learn the opposing pitchers this year. He missed so much time. So, really, this is more going to be like a rookie year for him than maybe people might be a little frustrated that he's not a little bit further ahead, but he's fast. I think he'll have the green light. He'll get on base. He's got a good eye. I think they'd like to see him walk a little bit more even than he does. But Bob Melvin right now has him hitting third when he's in the lineup, which I think is very interesting. Lamont Wade batting first. That could change. I mean, it will change. Teams now, not just the Giants, use 130, 140 different lineups sometimes in the course of the year. But that one is particularly interesting, and it tells you what Bob Melvin thinks about Jung Hoo Lee and also probably the front office, because if they were opposed, probably wouldn't be happening.
Absolutely. One final thing with the offense that intrigues me, we saw the Giants for a number of years struggle to develop some of their homegrown position players. Joey Bart didn't develop the way you'd hoped. Hunter Bishop, again, high draft picks. It just didn't quite work out. And you go back to when the Giants won those three World Series, 10, 12, and 14. So much of it was about homegrown talent from, Tim Lincecum and Matt Cain, Jonathan Sanchez, Brandon Belt, Buster Posey, Pablo Sandoval, Brian Wilson, Sergio Romo, all these guys were homegrown. And the Giants, it seemed like they struggled to develop some homegrown guys. Last year, we saw Elliot Ramos become an all-star, and the Giants hadn't had a homegrown outfielder become an all-star in something like 25 years. It took a really long time. We're seeing in spring in particular, Luis Matos and Grant McCray, two more young homegrown outfielders, have had good springs. What are you seeing from some of the young players the Giants are bringing up, and have they turned a corner somewhere in player development to help these guys maybe get up there and be more productive? Because again, there was a stretch, Chris Shaw, Joey Bart, Hunter Bishop, where the first round picks were just not hitting.
Well, I'm going to argue with a little bit on Joey Bart because, the Giants probably should have hung on to him last year. And he goes on and had a very decent year with Pittsburgh,
He did.
in and out of options here. The Tom Murphy signing remains low key one of the more baffling ones by the former front office. And I'm also going to throw in there, Patrick Bailey, Tyler Fitzgerald are also guys who are expected to be starters who are homegrown.
Yeah.
And obviously they've got a wealth of young pitchers, and Bryce Eldridge coming. We could go on and on.
Right. It's getting better. It really seems
Yeah,
like it.
it's getting better and better. Kyle Harrison, I'm not sure is going to be on the opening day roster, but there are homegrown guys that are who probably will, and Hayden Birdsong and
Yeah.
Landon Roop, who's just been they've both been sensational.
That
Really close
curveball
to
he
the
has is
spring.
ridiculous.
Yeah, these are good players. Ryan Walker, their closer, is
Yeah.
homegrown. Camilo Duvall, obviously. So I'm just going to keep going on and on, Kyle. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm just going to say that across the industry, I think that their farm system has been a little underrated because these are some pretty good to, in some cases, great players. Duvall also, and obviously an all-star.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, what was the question about
Well, I think what I
Matos?
was, is what
Oh,
I was,
who's
what I
the
was
next
thinking.
Ramos?
Well, no, I was going to say a lot of these guys you're mentioning, you're right. They have gotten, pretty good. And a lot of them were signed, 2020 and later. So I
Right.
guess where I'm at is you're right. It is getting better. And it seems like, have they turned the corner in terms of homegrown player development? Because you're right. All
Yeah.
these guys who you're
Yes.
naming post 2020, it seems like things have really improved compared to maybe where things were, call it 2015 to 2020. The last 5 years seem to be really a lot more productive.
Yeah, I think so, and I think we'll see more of that. We only saw Bryce Eldridge in camp briefly. He homered in his second at bat of the spring, and then kind of struggled. And I think he only had 11 at bats. Went out. He's still learning to play first base. He's 6'7", so to me, that's where I would put him.
Yeah.
I like that. He's very young. So. We will see him potentially this year, but not right away. Actually, the really interesting question, Kyle, because you like this kind of stuff, is where will he be most of the season? Because he could wind up going back to Richmond, less a factor of the fact that he, finished in Sacramento last year and he's not regressing or anything. That field in Sacramento is going to be in use by two teams with the
Yes.
A's also playing there. The surface is not going to be ideal for teaching somebody how to play first base. Although I guess you could argue maybe if you're playing on rock hard dirt every day, if you get called up to the big leagues, you go like, wow, this is easy, like learning to drive a stick shift in a hilly city or something. Um, yeah, I think we could see him, but yeah, they've got some really good young talent. And I'll tell you, Grant McCray is phenomenal. The speed, it's really fun. It's really
Yeah.
fun watching some of these young guys. That's been, and it's been a very uplifting spring, and a lot of it has been due to some of their young homegrown guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you see the veterans like Chapman and Damos performing, the young homegrown guys like Matos and McCray performing. And that's when special things come together, when the vets, the young homegrown guys, they're all coming together. Susan, just as we wrap up, I can hear and see the optimism you feel for this franchise coming into the season. Realistically, What do you think is possible for this team this year?
Well, I mean, I'd be crazy to say I think they're going to win the West. I think their goal is to make it difficult for the other top teams. I think they feel like they're a playoff team, and if a wild card would be wonderful. At the very least, they need to make some strides into the over 500 territory. That would probably be a disappointment, I think, though. I think this is a team that believes that they can be in the postseason. And they have enough in some areas. I'm not 100% convinced yet on the offense. They'll have to be creative. Jung-Hoo Lee will have to probably be healthy. We could see McCray right away, by the way. If Jung-Hoo Lee is not on the opening day roster, I think it's probably McCray. So that's really the one question mark, along with health, but everybody's got that question mark.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see what the Giants are able to do this year. As you mentioned, the West will be very, very stout with the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, and the Giants. Again, by all appearances, they seem like they've made some improvements, could be on their way up, and should be a fun race. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today and providing your insight and expertise. We really appreciate it.
Kyle, my pleasure. Anytime for you.
All right, everyone. That'll do it for another episode of Friar Territory here on the Foul Territory Network. Go ahead and give us a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever you're watching, listening on. We'd love to hear from you. For Susan Slusser, I'm Kyle Glazer. Thanks for watching. See you next week.